I think it's an easy narrative, Martin, that we've entered a phase of deglobalization driven by all the reactions to the inequality and the kind of winners and losers from that wonderful phase from the 1980s on, when you had the World Trade Organization, China entering the world economy, the Berlin Wall falling. And our thesis is a little different. We think there's actually a dual track era that we've now entered. So it's a new era, and absolutely there is a range of products where people want to build the highest possible fence and really protect their yard. And that is AI and semiconductors, that's EVs, that's 5G technology, that's military technology, that's metals and minerals, that's energy. But in other sectors outside of the US, we feel that kind of, like water, trade will flow. Comparative advantage and the most efficient place to do trade will continue. And don't forget that these high wall sectors are about 25% of global GDP. 75% still are things like apparel and consumer electronics and tourism. People will still watch Squid Games, those things will continue. Yeah. And then you add to that the US is maybe, just under 4 trillion in imports, just over 3 trillion in exports. So it's 7 trillion roughly of a 33 trillion global trade economy. So 80% of global trade is happening outside the US. So I think you're going to have globalization continue outside of the US, because there are many other South-South, other regional pacts that are going to develop.
So essentially what you're describing is basically the world literally splitting in half, fracturing, right? There's the US, right? And then there's everybody else, the rest of the world. And the rest of the world right now, which just got hit by massive tariffs 24 hours ago, they're going to be going, okay, look, if it's going to be so hard, right, with the US, all right, why don't we talk among ourselves? And there are existing trade arrangements, right, that they can mobilize and use or use more. And conceivably, we could get a situation where the rest of the world ends up working together more closely and lowering tariffs among and between each other, no?
Exactly. I think the world's going to fracture on two dimensions. One, the rest of the world versus US trade, given the global trade war that seems to have just begun on Liberation Day. And second, I think ultimately economic logic will prevail even in the US. And these sectors which are strategically important, where every country will build the highest possible walls around them, will permanently deglobalize, and people will want things like biologics, AI, semiconductors, EVs, military technology done at home. And the other 75%, where, yes, right now we've seen these massive tariffs placed, particularly across Asian countries and the EU. But over time, I think it'll just prove that to create these products economically within the US isn't feasible, and things will return more to kind of a more globalized nature even there. This will happen over the long term. Yeah. In the near term, you're absolutely right.
So what about the thinking we were talking about with Fred Newman just a couple of minutes ago, right? The rest of the world, yes, he agrees, they're likely to cooperate more with each other, right? But most of these nations, including China, right, and India, right, they're known for more making stuff than they are buying or consuming stuff, right? And for this group, they're still going to need the U.S., aren't they? Because it is not just the biggest economy in the world, but the biggest consumption or consumer economy in the world.
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, I think the U.S. still needs these goods as well, right? You simply can't wave a magic wand and say all manufacturing will be created in the U.S. You need to create new supply chains. You need to create new industries. You need new skills. Not everybody can, create a fabrication plant. So this will take 5-7 years. It'll be an immensely costly and long-term transformation that will take place. I think the second piece is, China plus one has proven to be a little tricky with the tariff ranges that you just gave. Oh, yeah. So the real question is also, where will that plus one now move to or add to? People are talking about India, people are talking about Morocco, Costa Rica. What are other places where there's enough expertise and technical skills in the labor force for countries to diversify? Because just China plus Vietnam or China plus Indonesia now has a lot of tariff headwinds to that.
So you're saying it's not that there's no place to run, but there are other places to run to.
There will be new places to run to, as well as some countries that just have advantages in things like minerals, like think Indonesia with nickel, think Australia with lithium. When their own critical commodities, and you'll notice that was sort of excluded from the tariff package, those countries will have competitive advantages that are very hard to change. I would also say, Martin, in areas like EVs with companies like Tesla and BYD, or semiconductors with TSMC, the incumbent advantage of scale and size and expertise is so high that I think it'll be more about shifting these factories to the EU or to the US rather than a whole new set of players emerging in the industry. We think that's very implausible.